So was the crowd happy? I know investors were pretty happy the next 24 hours. How about the Apple fanatics out there? Was it enough?
The Fanatics got a bunch of what they were looking for. This is the developer conference, so it's not like here's a new phone or a new iPad. This is all the inner workings, and that's where the developers really like to geek out. And so I guess we're on iOS 18 at this point. They seem to get a lot of features that they wanted, some things that they got to work on over the next few days. This week has been big for the developers. And yeah, I mean, starting the next morning, the stock was off to the races, becoming the most valuable company again, leapfrogging Nvidia and Microsoft, which, by the way, as we speak, are also $3 trillion companies. But
Yeah.
Apple just gained a stunning amount of stock market value in the 2 or 3 days after, just on the, I guess, AI momentum that people were waiting for.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
Hello. I'm good, Michael. Thank you.
It's been a busy
Ready to
week
go.
for news, so we got a lot to cover. So I'm gonna skip the preliminaries. Let's get rolling. First of all, Apple had, as we talked about last week, Apple had its big annual worldwide developers meeting in San Francisco. Were you there? I'm sure you were there.
Yeah, this was actually at its headquarters in Cupertino, the
Oh,
Worldwide Developer Conference keynote. And yeah, all about AI. And my goodness, did it send off a frenzy of investing and stock buying? Goodness.
so they're now doing that at the Death Star instead of up in Moscone Center in San Francisco. Okay. Um, so it was big AI day for them, right? I mean, that's what everyone was expecting. That's what everybody was predicting, and that's what everybody said they needed to do because they were falling behind. So was
Yeah,
it
it
as
took
big
them a
as you
while to
thought it was going to
get,
be? Was it a big news story?
it took them a while to get there, but it's what everybody expected eventually that they would do. And they pointed out that they've upgraded Siri so that Siri now uses machine learning to answer your questions. They still won't call it artificial intelligence. They call AI Apple intelligence. So that's their way of branding this.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
they also said if Siri doesn't give you the result you're looking for, if their AI is not powerful enough, they also have an agreement, sort of a plan B with OpenAI. So they too are on the OpenAI bandwagon, and they will let you use ChatGPT on your phone. So there's all sorts of ways now to dial into AI.
So they're calling it Apple Intelligence, but you're actually going to OpenAI to get your information.
That's one way to do it. Yeah, they've sort of got both bases covered with their own AI, and no word yet on how or if they can monetize that. Remember, AI is still kind of a question mark when it comes to how to make money with this.
Yeah.
And then Plan B would be you can use ChatGPT if you want.
Now they also kind of doubled down on privacy, didn't they, and secrecy. That there are certain apps now that you can run on your phone that will not go to the cloud and keep it under your control.
One thing you can do is to make an app go away from your home screen. So if you're saying, hey, sure, here, kid, you can control the music in the car. Here's my phone. Or, yeah, you can play that game you like on my phone, but you don't want them, for whatever reason, to see certain apps. You can make them not visible on your phone until you want to use them. So that's one way to, I guess, sort of cover your tracks a bit.
So was the crowd happy? I know investors were pretty happy the next 24 hours. How about the Apple fanatics out there? Was it enough?
The Fanatics got a bunch of what they were looking for. This is the developer conference, so it's not like here's a new phone or a new iPad. This is all the inner workings, and that's where the developers really like to geek out. And so I guess we're on iOS 18 at this point. They seem to get a lot of features that they wanted, some things that they got to work on over the next few days. This week has been big for the developers. And yeah, I mean, starting the next morning, the stock was off to the races, becoming the most valuable company again, leapfrogging Nvidia and Microsoft, which, by the way, as we speak, are also $3 trillion companies. But
Yeah.
Apple just gained a stunning amount of stock market value in the 2 or 3 days after, just on the, I guess, AI momentum that people were waiting for.
And it was comforting. I mean, they didn't want Apple to make a misstep. I mean, if Apple didn't have anything this time, I think that would have been seen as a catastrophe for the company.
I mean, it's interesting to think where the AI has gone so far. And we've seen some earning reports that have just popped because of their association, largely software companies like Oracle and Adobe Systems that have done really well. Look at Broadcom stock. My goodness, they also declared a 10-for-1 stock split. And that's a software company saying we're able to get better results because of the machines. And Apple is saying we're going to put AI on our machines. And that was a bit of a question mark. How would this work? And we still don't know. It's coming up later this year for Apple. If you want it on your phone, you have to have a 15 or better, which means we're going to have a lot of people probably going through this upgrade cycle to get the newest phones. And, we'll have to see how it works and if it's something the public is going to use every day, because after all, think of how often during the day we use our phones.
Yeah, well, I was sitting with a startup CEO, entrepreneur, and I said, how does this play out? And he says, well, here. And he took his phone out and he talked to ChatGPT and said, put together a brief summary of the opportunities ahead of this company. And in 5 seconds, it gave me a business plan. I mean, I was astounded not only how fast it was, because I played with it a little bit, but how complete it was. And it actually made it dumb enough for me. So, I mean, I was vastly impressed. Has anybody given a Siri a test drive with that on it now?
I mean, I imagine that the testers have. It's not yet rolled out to the general public. That happens later this year. So we haven't been able to get our hands on it to give it that road test. ChatGPT has an app that you can have on your iPhone already. I've used that. And yeah, it is impressive. I mean, remember, this is a service machine that scours the entire web, which is why you get these amazingly fast and complete results. You also get your share of mistakes because not everything on the web is accurate, but it is impressively fast. Yeah, go figure.
I trust it completely. Okay, let's move on to Tesla. It had an interesting week. I mean, it began the week with the California Department of Motor Vehicles alleging that Tesla disseminated false statements about its autopilot and full self-driving feature. I don't know what that means. They say Tesla claimed more than made it sound more advanced than it really was. I don't know. What are the repercussions of that? A fine?
There haven't been, because this is something that Tesla has been caught doing over and over again with its self-driving, claiming it's full self-driving when it's not, and that sort of thing. And I don't think there have been any repercussions so far. The company has been able to keep developing it and keep working on it and keep overstating what it can do. And that's something that I just hope people sort of take into account, that this is something that is gaining in its impressiveness, that is using some impressive technology, but literally every statement about it has been overstating what it can do. So we're not at the point where we can believe this stuff yet.
Yeah, but is hyperbole a valley characteristic? I mean, you announce more than you've got on the belief that 6 months from now, you'll get there and you'll deliver it.
Yes, but that usually goes for processing power and the speed of your computer, not how, much you can have your car drive itself. That's kind of a different trust factor there, I'd say.
Or have your blood tested. We'll get to Elizabeth Holmes today too.
Or have your blood tested. Yes, of course.
Okay, then midweek, Tesla and Elon Musk actually announced that the Tesla shareholders had voted, despite the ruling of the Chancery Court in Delaware, to give Elon his $56 billion bonus. I noticed the New York Times said $46 billion, but everybody else said $56 billion, and I think it's the latter.
Well, the reason for that is this was originally a pay package that was worth much, much less. Remember, this was done years ago, and they said if Tesla meets all of these market values, Musk gets the package. At the peak, that was $56 billion. Now Tesla's stock is a bit lower, and that's why you get the lower figure. But the $56 billion comes from what it was worth, I guess, when Remember last year, Tesla shareholders also approved it, but then the Delaware court said, no, it wasn't done properly. You have to go back to the drawing board. That's what this week's shareholder meeting was. Once again, the shareholders approve it. It still has to go to the court. I assume the lawyers crossed their T's and dotted their I's a little bit better this time. And now you may notice, at least in the evening right after that vote, Tesla got a little bit of a bump. I think people think that investor-wise, this is a sigh of relief.
Yeah, 6% jump in the stock. I guess the shareholders really like the idea. And I think it's going to be interesting when the case comes up in Delaware again, because now Tesla, as of this week, is a Delaware company. And that's maybe the Court of Chancery isn't going to screw over a local company.
I don't know
So
if they consider them a local company.
That's probably a one-room office somewhere in, yeah.
Right. I mean, companies since HP have been doing this, where they'll be headquartered somewhere and then incorporated in Delaware. And that's what I believe Tesla has done.
And then finally, at the end of the week, the company announced that it has now shipped 6 million Tesla cars, which is, quite a thing. I mean, who would have thought they'd be able to sell this many millions of cars in this short a time in the modern world when we hadn't really seen a serious EV when they first announced?
It is impressive, Mike. And you're talking about the top selling cars in the world as far as the Model Y and the Model 3. You've got your SUV, your sort of crossover that everybody loves, and it's at a reasonable price, and it's electric. And then you got a sedan. They're starting to move some Cybertrucks. One thing they said during the shareholder meeting was that they had a week where they sold 1,300 Cybertrucks. I really don't know what that means in terms of numbers of trucks. I imagine the F-150 moves that many in an hour.
An hour, yeah. In Oklahoma.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, given that it's still selling super high priced cars like the Model S and the X and the Cybertruck, and then just a ton of the lower priced cars, they've really made EVs mainstream. And around here, where I am in Silicon Valley, you see them all the time, everywhere, nonstop. And, the more you travel, you start to see Teslas as well, and other EVs that are still playing catch up, but in a manner that I think it's something that people are just realizing these cars work, whether I have children or a commute or whatever. As long as there's a decent range, the cars work and people like them.
Oh, they're so ubiquitous around here. I've literally been in an intersection and looked around, and there were 6 Teslas waiting at the light all around me. I mean, it's quite a sight. Okay, well, and the other interesting thing about that announcement is they're now using 2 Optimus robots working autonomously on their manufacturing line. And, these aren't just arms doing stuff. These are actual robots with, anthropomorphic body shapes and heads and all of that. It must be interesting to be like an old line union worker working on an assembly line, looking at the black and white robot working away next to you, who doesn't get a coffee break, doesn't get a lunch hour. I mean, maybe they unplug them and let them cool down for an hour. Maybe that's their break. I don't know, but they look pretty tireless.
I guess my question would be, would you be a union worker on that assembly line? I don't think so. Not right now at Tesla, at least.
No.
And if you have any ambitions of being a union worker, how do you feel seeing literally a humanoid robot, drilling I don't know. I don't know where that goes. It is a little more than a robotic arm, and robotics are everywhere in the automobile industry. I get that. But that's going to be quite the picture when someday there are, say, 3 actual people and 17 robots on a line, and you realize you're outnumbered. I just can't imagine.
Well, and then the next step is the whole factory works in the dark.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. They don't need breaks. They don't need meals. Yeah.
Yeah. And they don't crowd the freeways driving home at 3 o'clock. Okay. The numbers that just came out suggest that salaries in Silicon Valley are shrinking. Now, that astounds me with all the boom going on here and these companies crossing the $3 trillion mark and hiring AI people. The notion that the cost and the cost of living still going up here, especially real estate. people are making less. I mean, the average pay dropped 15.25% from 22 to 23. Now, some of that's got to be COVID, people coming back to work and people getting laid off during this AI transition. But the other tech hubs in the United States did a whole lot better than Silicon Valley in this regard.
Right. But there are a couple big things that stick out. I saw that survey. Our area dropped by 15%. Our area is still far and away the highest paying area for tech salaries. So the number one area took a dip in a year that saw a bunch of layoffs, a lot of people able to move to different places, heck, companies testing machines to take the place of people, and just the fact that even the year before, we were also the highest paid tech hub. Other places are playing catch up. And still, even after the 15% knock, we're still the highest paid tech hub. So you've got to keep it all in perspective.
Yeah.
But I do wonder, given that our cost of living is so high, our housing costs are so high, whether you're renting or buying, what we're telling young people right now, whether you are moving here from a different place or coming out of Stanford or Cal or San Jose State or whatever, we're telling them, hey, good luck trying to find a place to live that doesn't, take all of your money, as opposed to other cities that are also paying good salaries. I worry that we're going to lose a lot of that young energy that literally is the reason Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley.
Well, I drove by Stanford on El Camino a couple of days ago, and I think that's that and Central Expressway in Mountain View, off Central Expressway near the park there at Ringstorf. The barometer is how many SUVs do you and trailers do you see parked there? Where people decide, I'm not going to pay the prices of Silicon Valley, but I want to work here. I mean, we saw that extreme example 6 or 7 years ago, and I'm curious if we're going to see it growing again.
Right. Even with a high average tech salary, not everybody is making enough to afford a home, certainly to catch in enough stock options, even for a down payment. So you have this income inequality, even in a really, really wealthy area. And that is because so much of our wealth is tied up in such a small percentage of people. And I just don't see that changing anytime soon, given that these big major tech companies have a whole lot of the hot technology. They continue to hire people and pay a whole lot of money. But what about the rest of us? And obviously, the rest of the salaries aren't anywhere near keeping up.
Well, 20 years ago was more democratic because that was before the Federal Accounting Board decided to change the rules on stock options. If we were to go back to employee stock options the way they were, we'd have a lot more people being much more financially comfortable in this town.
Right. And stock options are still given out fairly consistently, fairly widely, but how many people really get them? It's just not something that the rest of the economy, even within Silicon Valley, can get close to keeping up with.
Yeah, well, there was a sea change when FASB changed the rules and on reporting options and all that. And we could change everything around here if we had the ability, if companies had the ability to include stock options. I mean, not just vesting, but give it to employees when they get hired. I mean, you look at numbers like you put $1,000, I think, in NVIDIA 5 years ago, it's worth $177,000 now. That would be nice for buying a house.
Right. Right.
Well, anyway, okay. Coincidentally, the Department of Homeland Security is now talking about adding another, was it $4,000 fee on people getting their H-1B visas, and they're calling it I think it's a logistics fee or something like that. So now we get, if a company has more than 50 workers, they're going to have to pay a lot more money for each one of those workers. What are they doing? I mean,
they're torpedoing the tech industry. I mean, remember the cities that said we should have an employee tax, and how well that did in places like Mountain View and Seattle, where you have all these tech companies. And, you know, even Jeff Bezos was like, I'll just move Amazon away. And they said, okay, they backed away. This is similar. This is where a whole lot of talented workers come to work in Silicon Valley, which again, remember, is already telling young people, we're going to make it really hard for you to find a place to live and raise a family. So now you want to tell another group of people, we're going to make it harder and more expensive for you to come here and work and raise a family. This is how you end up giving ground to places like Texas and Florida and the like. And I just don't understand it. And the good times are still here. We're doing well as an economy. What I worry is that people won't start.
Yeah.
Right. I just worry people won't start thinking about it until it's too late.
Okay. And finally, I was going to say your old friend, but I think she haunted your dreams for years. Uh, Elizabeth Holmes, the woman who took a year out of your life uh, for her misadventures. Uh, Apparently, she got her appeal, is going to get her appeal heard, or got it heard, and people that covered it said she may have gained some ground on getting out. Apparently, they're talking about a mistrial because one of the individuals allowed to testify as an expert didn't qualify as an expert.
So I was in the courtroom that day. I continue to follow the goings on of
It
Elizabeth
never
Holmes.
ends.
Right. And, you know, don't make it seem like this is something bad. This was actually quite a good career thing for me. Sure, if you look at my smartphone, you might say, oh, he's got two daughters and a strange obsession with Elizabeth Holmes. But as far as the hearing, it was interesting. Each side got 15 minutes to speak. So Holmes' attorneys had 15 minutes to sort of plead their case. Different courtroom. This was not downtown San Jose. This was San Francisco. This was the appellate court, 3-judge panel. And Holmes' attorney had a chance to do this. And you're right, the comments were interesting. In the early going, one of the judges said, hey, the evidence is overwhelming. You guys really have a tall hill to climb here. And I thought, well, this doesn't look good for her chances. By the end of even the morning, one of the judges had said that there is an interesting case here. She may have something to go on. Breadcrumbs, I realize it's very early. Most lawyers tell me it's really hard to turn one of these verdicts around on this level. But you never know. And like you said, it was someone who was a scientist at Theranos who testified about the machines, which on one level makes sense. But apparently he was not seen or registered as an expert witness, but rather an employee. And I don't know if that's enough of a technicality to move things along as far as her appeal goes. But that is where apparently the hope right now lies for her getting out and perhaps getting a new trial.
So who was there in San Francisco in the courtroom? Just the attorney?
So it was her attorneys. And oddly enough, as soon as her attorneys were done, attorneys for Sunny Balwani, her former Theranos partner, had their chance to plea for an appeal. So it was the attorneys and then actually some family members. I saw Elizabeth Holmes' parents and I saw her partner. Billy Evans was there. And then, a smattering of legal reporters. It didn't get quite the attention that it did back during the trial. But it was interesting to see some of her lawyers who did not comment. I asked them for comment, but they did say, hey, you're here again. And it was like, we're getting the band back together kind of a vibe.
I was going to say, you guys swapping Christmas cards
right.
and birthday presents?
Not exactly. I'm sure they would love for the likes of me and all those court reporters to go away. But it was a chance to not exactly relitigate the trial, but to hear some of the arguments that I remember them making back during the trial itself.
Were there any comments about how she's doing in prison?
No, and we asked both Holmes' attorneys and Balwani's attorneys, and they chose not to comment on that. Okay. So we occasionally hear things about how it's going. As of May, which is just a month ago, that was the 1-year anniversary of her being in prison, I think. So it's been a year, and time marches on. And it's also interesting. I wasn't sure if we'd get an actual answer on that day. Does she have a new trial? Does the appeal get turned down? And the attorneys did say that it can take weeks, even months. And I guess when you're in prison for, somewhere around 9 years, you've got some time to think about it. But we are now waiting to hear what the appellate judges say. in response. So that's what we're waiting for now.
So you actually may still be covering the story when she leaves prison. You thought it would be 12 years from now. You thought you'd be on a sunny beach in, in France, but you may still be here when she walks out of prison.
Right. I imagined right. Be less of the sort of ending of Shawshank Redemption, meeting on a beach. Hey, is that you? Were you? But no, not that. Who knows? I really don't know. All I can do is ask the lawyers, and they say the odds are slim that she gets out or gets another trial. But I guess even with slim odds in the legal system, you give it a try, and that's what happened in San Francisco.
Don't you I don't know. I kind of feel like sentiment has changed a little bit about her. Like she's still got a lot of enmity, she's facing here in the Valley, but the Valley moves on, and it moves on fast. And I don't know if it's in a forgiving mood, but it might be in a couple years.
It's interesting that you bring that up because, right, we've certainly had our trials since then. Sam Bankman-Fried got a large jail sentence. We've had others go to prison for fraud. On the other hand, science has moved on. Technology has moved on. Every once in a while, I see a headline about a blood device. And, my eye starts to twitch a little bit. But then you realize some of this stuff is working. And I don't know if Theranos moved anything forward whatsoever, or if it was just a huge step back and a lot of money lost. But people are still working on these things in the lab.
Sure they are. And when an actual working product appears, she might be reconsidered as a voice in the wilderness.
Right. Time does change how people are thought of, and that would be something.
That would be ironic. Okay, that's it for now, folks. You can find us on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. You can see Scott on Facebook and X, and of course, almost every weeknight on NBC Bay Area. And you can hear me regularly on the BBC World Radio show Business Matters. Have a great weekend. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Take care. Bye-bye.